Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started. I don't think anybody's jumped into the stream yet, but I wanted to cover the kind of introduction, including some kind of overview techniques to working with particles in Unreal. And there's a number of interesting things that we can do, but I just wanted to show you kind of a brief introduction to some of the things that are possible, and then we can expand from there into more interesting stuff in the second half. So my first segment here is going to give you a broad overview, but I'm also doing a couple of things in Photoshop and the material editor, so that we'll get kind of a setup for making interesting stuff in Unreal Engine. And then I'm going to give you an idea of how to do some of the kind of cool basic processes in Cascade, the particle system. So the two things we're going to make tonight is I'm going to make a simple kind of like particle fire effect, and then we're going to make like a particle spark. And then we're going to see about actually like copying those things and using them together. So there's a couple of kind of cool little things that we'll do there. But yeah, so before we start with anything in Unreal, I actually am going to make a texture asset that's going to be of use for us. Oh, I just see somebody got into the chat. So I don't actually know who's in chat, so if you tell me who it is, I don't remember everybody's username. I held off a little bit so that you guys could all show up, so or at least one or two of you could show up. I know a lot of people have different schedules, so it's totally fine. Hey, Nick, glad to see that you're here. So yeah, I'm glad you're here. That way we can actually do some questions and things, and if you can stop me while we're going along and ask me questions about some of the things that I'm doing, or give me an idea of where you guys sort of want to head. So I'm going to start with Photoshop, and I'm going to make an asset that may seem a little bit strange to you guys at first, but it's a good idea of how Epic handles a lot of their stuff with textures and material kind of combining, but then it also is a good way to just learn general techniques that are useful for setting up textures. So, okay, I started up a new file, but I'm actually going to I'm going to start up a new one so you guys can see what I'm doing in Photoshop, and I'm going to call this T particle mask. And I'm actually just going to make it a 1024 by 1024 image. I'm going to hit OK. And then I have this kind of T particle mask thing here. And it's going to be all white like this. So first thing I want to do is I want to double click on my background. Hit OK, so that now it's a layer that I can properly edit. In the bottom left in my color picker, I'm going to make sure I have a black color, and I'm going to hold Alt backspace to fill this with black. Now, I'm going to do a couple of different things, but basically I need to make 3 images, and then I'm going to be utilizing those images to make a kind of a compound texture. So I need a few groups, so I'm basically going to I'm going to hold down Alt and drag each of these. And then I'm going to hit Control-G while I have these groups. And one of them I'm going to call Cloud. One of them I'm going to call Radial Gradient. And one of them I'm going to call Blob. And I'll show you really quick how all of this is going to work. These are just some examples, but so under the cloud, I'm going to grab the layer there, the layer that's inside that cloud group, and I'm going to go to Filter, Render, Clouds. Now, you can do that a few times if you wanted to until you get a different pattern, but clouds tend to be pretty uniformly random, so it's really not that big a deal. You can also take a look at difference clouds. which actually creates some cool effects. But for now, I'm just going to do a clouds render. So filter, render, clouds. Okay, so I have that. I'm going to hide it. And I'm going to go to this radial gradient. And this time, I'm going to select the gradient tool. Now, it may be helpful to kind of set values for this so that I know where I'm going to place things. So I have rulers displaying, but I can go to Window and Show Rulers. And basically, if you grab on a ruler segment, you can drag out a ruler guide. And I'm going to do that for both the top and the side. And that way, I actually just, if you turn on snapping, so right now I have snapping checked, and this is okay if you're not super familiar with Photoshop, but these are all good things to know. So if you have snapping turned on and you use rulers, it'll actually allow you to snap. You'll notice a subtle snap in the middle, which will let you know when you're exactly in the middle of your image, so you can set these up. And then I'm going to click on the gradient tool. Make sure I have the gradient tool selected, but I can also hit the G key to bring up that tool. And you'll notice at the top left, there's a couple of gradient tool options. So I just noticed that my my window is probably getting a little bit covered up by my face. So just to show you, I have these layers right here. And actually, for now, I think I'll just set it up so that you can see the layers. So with that layer inside the radial gradient there, I'm going to grab my gradient tool. I want to select a radial gradient. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to click in the middle of where I dragged out those ruler lines. And then I'm going to hold down Shift. And I'm going to drag out a gradient. So now this is not the correct gradient because it's actually the reverse. So there's two ways you could fix that. If I hit Control Z, I can undo that. And then I can hit X on the keyboard, and then it'll just switch which colors are which. And so I'm dragging just from the middle to the outside edge. And then it should give me a gradient that looks like that. Now what's cool too is if you did get the wrong colors, you can actually hit Control I, and you can just invert it that way. So now I have my cool little radial gradient there. And then the last thing that I want to do is I want to create a blob. So I'm going to hide that group. And then in my blob section, I'm going to do this one a little bit differently because I'm going to switch to the brush tool by hitting the B key on the keyboard. And I'm going to expand it with the brackets and then make sure it's super soft by using shift brackets. And I want this to be a very, 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 very big brush. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make, let's see, I'm going to undo that real quick. So I actually have flow and opacity set a little bit too much. So I'm going to make sure my opacity and my flow are 100 for this, just because it'll be a little bit easier to manage. So let me double check and make sure that my radial gradient is correct. Yeah, okay, there we go. So then in that blob layer, with a more defined brush, I'm going to basically toggle back and forth between picking, let's see, I'm just going through and trying to make kind of a blobby shape. Now the reason that I'm actually doing this where I'm putting something in and then I'm painting along the outside edge in a dark color is that I don't want this to actually have light color extending out into the outside edges. So, and you can get more precise kind of blobby shapes by making a smaller brush. see. Don't want to make that look too uniform. Yeah, and so let's see. All right, so I'm gonna probably not go too nuts with this, but mainly we want to have something that we can use as a basis for making some kind of odd-looking shapes. And I could go on a really long time doing this, so it really just, you want to get something that looks like it's not super crazy, but also looks like it has some specific details, so it's not just like a single sphere. Okay, so yeah, honestly, I think that's probably okay. Now, I need to actually take this, and I'm going to stick these different colors into the channels of this texture. And this is going to be kind of an odd process, because you usually would just paint whatever is there in your texture and then leave it alone. But I'm going to actually put it into a channel. So what you want to do is you want to grab one of these layers, grab the marquee selection tool. And so, for example, I'm going to make sure that these layers are all turned on for right now. I want the cloud, so I'm going to marquee select the cloud. I'm going to hold Control-C, and I'm going to go to the channels, and I'm going to go to the red, and I'm going to paste it into the red. Then I'm going to turn this off, and I have my radial gradient layer. I'm going to hold Control-C. Then I'm going to go into the channels, select the green, actually, I think I'm not doing this the right way. Let's see. Do this all the time. All of a sudden, now I'm getting it wrong. Okay. Actually, I think what we're going to have to do here is we're going to have to make a separate texture. Let's see. Red. Okay. Yes. Okay. Sorry about that. This is actually a little bit. It's going to be a little bit more complicated. So, what you have to do in order to set this up this way, there's probably another way of doing it, but it's actually pretty straightforward this way. I'm going to go ahead and grab this. Let's see. So we have these two textures. I just made a new one. This one is the particle mask. It's actually the source of what we're using. So I'm going to grab this cloud texture, hold copy, Control-C, then go into my other blank one, select the red channel, hit paste, and then I'm going to do the same with each of the green and the blue. So with my radial gradient, I want to make sure I hide that cloud so I have the radial gradient. And then you would just paste that into, say, the green channel here. And then the last one is I want to grab this blob, and then I'm going to go into the blue channel, and I'm going to paste that. So what happens is when you look at the grand total of this, you're going to see this really weird effect that looks like it's this strange hybrid of a bunch of different things. But what you're really getting out of this is that you're actually getting it so that you can take these things that are all individually grayscale and you can stick them into a texture here. So now that I've got that, I'm actually going to take this and I'm going to export it. So I'm going to save as, and in this case I'm just going to save it on my desktop. And I'm going to save it as a targa, and I'm going to call it T particle mask. Now, if you want to use an alpha channel, you need to use 32 bits, but I have 24 bits for the RGB, and 24 is fine. Now, it doesn't really matter for right now because it's just kind of a demonstration, but in the long run, you'll want to save your PSD as well. So I'm going to save this. And this is kind of our source where you're still going to have to copy it into another. So Nick, you asked, did you duplicate the file or did you just make a new radial? So actually what I did is I had all of these layers in my one PSD file, and then I just created a new blank PSD. And I just copied into the red channel, so I selected the red channel, and then I copied what it was that I wanted in the red channel, and then I put it into the red. And then I did the same for the green and the blue. And sorry, it's been a little while since I did this, so I forgot that you have to have two separate files. But basically, what you're trying to do in the long run is you're trying to optimize your texture space. There is no actual reason you have to do it this way. You could actually just save out 3 separate images of like, this is the cloud, and this is the gradient, and this is the blob, right? And there's really nothing at all that is making that something that you can't do. So there are a few different ways you can handle this. It really is not like a super big deal. But yeah, like the problem is that why I was doing it, why I was having a little bit of trouble with this before, is if you copy something into a channel of a working document, when you adjust your layers, you'll notice that it actually will change the channels. So if I turn off the clouds, then it'll show the red, the green, and the blue. And so like what I was trying to do here instead is not change anything about the actual base and just copy channels. Now there's probably some tools that you can grab that would do this a little bit faster and easier, but there's nothing wrong with this, so I just suggest that this is fine. So we exported our texture, and hopefully that was a good enough explanation of how it works, so that makes sense. So we exported our texture, and I wanted to go in, and I actually wanted to make some content here. So I'm in Unreal Engine in my test scene, and I'm going to right-click. I'm going to make a new folder. I'm going to call this Particles Week 3. And I won't make a space or anything in there. And then inside that, I'm going to go to either New Asset, Import, and I'm going to try to browse to my texture. And so I have this T particle mask. I'm going to import that. Okay, and then you see we have our particle mask here. So that's good. And I'm going to now make a material. And I'm going to name this cloud. Actually, smoke. M_smoke. And then I'm going to open it up. And now there's a lot of different ways you can handle particle systems, but usually, even in today's graphics rendering, it's a good idea to make particles unlit for performance reasons. So materials all have different core properties. And what we want to do is we want to change the blend mode from opaque to translucent, and that'll give us the ability to use opacity. And then we can change it from default lit to unlit. And then basically that'll limit what's possible for the effects, but it will give us the ability to use this emissive color. And there's a few different ways that we can handle this for different types of particles, but for right now, this one is pretty good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag this particle mask in, and I'm going to have a few different effects that I can use for this. So for emissive color, I'm actually going to drag the red channel into the emissive color. And then I'm going to go ahead and save this. Okay, and so what you'll notice here is that we've got this kind of cloudy looking effect. And I'm actually going to put this on a preview mesh of a plane because we're going to be able to see what this stuff looks like more easily that way. And then I'm going to take this, and there's a few different things we can do, but I'm going to take first the green, and I'm going to plug that into the opacity. I just saw the in the Twitch stream that it looked like I was advertising Coke, but I totally wasn't. Okay. So now, once this comes back, you'll see how it looks. But basically, what we're doing if we use this kind of radial gradient effect is that it makes it look like things are kind of disappearing towards the outer edges. And then if I were to take the blue channel, which was the kind of blobby looking one we made, we'll notice that there's a different result to that. Right. So when you use the blue channel, you actually get a little bit more kind of a crazy result. But like one thing that you'll notice about this is that just using this one emissive is not super great for this effect because like obviously the emissive is doing black and white, but it's also in the spots where it's black, it's actually fully solid because that opacity is totally being controlled by the blue channel of this texture. So what we can actually do is we can do like a multiply by holding down M on the keyboard and clicking. And what we can do is we can actually take that cloud and the blue, and we can multiply those together. So then when we actually get our result. One thing I'm not a huge fan of in Unreal 4 is how long it takes to save and update particles or materials or that kind of stuff. So it takes a little more time than I mean to. So, okay, I see you said that your opacity is actually grayed out. So you're following along. That's good. But so if your opacity is grayed out, that's probably because your blend mode is not set to translucent. So the default, if you click outside of any nodes and you go to material, blend mode is normally opaque. And opaque doesn't allow you to use opacity. But translucent does. Okay, so cool. Now, I'm going to go through this a little bit slower than maybe I need to, but the idea is that in the long run, I'm hoping that it's going to teach you a little bit more about how things work. So I'm going to make another multiply, and I'm going to connect the results of this multiply into the opacity here. And then I'm going to hold down 1 and click, and I'm going to make a connection to this multiply. And basically what I want to do, my goal here, is that I want to make this stuff more intense, or essentially brighter, and therefore give it a little bit more of actual visible clouds. Let's see. Yeah, so it takes a second to update. But like the idea is we can do a few different things to make this look clearer. So like, for example, I can set this to 2 or 5, something a little bit more extreme. and you can get an idea of like sort of what's happening here, because you see how it's changing the pattern. But anyway, I think that for right now, I'm not actually totally in love with this at the moment. So I'm going to do something else that's a little bit interesting, which is I don't like how much the cloud is actually removing information. So rather than using the cloud exactly like it is, I'm going to take a clamp and I'm going to alter it. So the if you type in the word clamp, you can go to math clamp, and then I'm going to hold down 1 and click, and then I get a constant, and this constant I'm going to plug into the minimum, and under the minimum I'm going to put 0.2, and then in between this texture and the multiply, I'm going to plug in the red channel, which is our cloud there. And that'll give me a little bit more control. And actually, now that I have that, I don't even need to do quite as much with the multiply at the end of the node. So I'm going to probably bring that back down to like 2 or something like that. Now, there's definitely a lot of ways you can handle this differently. So one way that you could do that is you could make it that the cloud that you produce out of Photoshop doesn't have a black value. So it's like a difference between white and gray or something like that. And there's definitely different ways that are all have their own advantages and disadvantages. But in general, I'm going to give you a broad idea of how this stuff works. So you can do a lot of things in the material editor that would normally require recreating assets, and I just want you to be aware that that's how that works. So okay, I think this is actually going to work pretty well, but there's something that I know is going to be a gotcha later on, so I'm actually going to do it right now. But I was considering the idea of not doing it at this moment. I'm just concerned for time. But one thing that you have to make sure is that when you're using particles, you need to search for things like particle color. You actually have to put a particle color node into your setup to control both the opacity and the color. If you don't have a particle color node, you're going to plug this into a particle system, and it will not work the way that you're expecting it to. So you'll be like, why doesn't the color change, or why doesn't the opacity change? And that's just because you didn't have this particle color node kind of making stuff happen. So I'm going to use a multiply, and I'm going to multiply my particle color and my regular masking here. So I get that cloud combined with the particle color. And I'm going to run that into the emissive color. And I need one more multiply here. So M and click. Then I'm going to connect to the opacity. And the multiply. And I'm going to take the alpha from this particle color. I'm going to plug it into that multiply. So, and you may have to kind of rearrange things a little bit, because I know this is starting to get a little bit fuzzy, but it should be helpful to see. Okay, so we've got a basic setup for this cloud stuff going on here. And I'm going to save, and then we're going to jump in to Cascade, and then we'll go over the process of what we need to do. So since I started a little bit late, I'm probably going to go till my time, at least around 8:15. But I want to see if I can cover as many things as possible. Since I think this week we were targeting 3 hours of lecture, and I only have 2 sessions, so I may go somewhere between an hour and a half, and you guys can skip through it as you need. So, okay. So now that I've got this basic smoke here, I'm going to, in my particles folder, right-click, and I'm going to create a new particle system. Now, creating basic assets, you have blueprint class, you have a level, you have a material, and a particle system. And I'm going to call this PS underscore, PS is for particle system. And I'm actually going to call this fire, but we'll get into more detail on why I'm calling it fire in a minute. So I'm going to double click. So this is your Cascade particle editor, and there's quite a few things that we can do with this this editor. I can't necessarily describe every single aspect of it to you, but hopefully I can go over enough of them that it will kind of make sense. So basically, a particle system is a collection of a bunch of different particle emitters which are listed over on the right side, and you have a viewport where you get to see the result of your particle system. When you defaults, you can adjust a number of properties in the details panel for your default particle settings, but most of the time what you're going to end up doing is you're going to click on your actual emitter. There's going to be certain things in that particle emitter, or you'll go down to the different categories for required, spawn, lifetime, and you'll be able to see all the different properties that are there. Once you have something that you want to edit on a curve, you basically just graph it by clicking the graph icon, and then you can get a graph display that shows you what it is that you're going to want to do there. And there's a lot of different advantages and disadvantages of using the graph. But for now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete what I'm currently looking at. Yeah, no, actually, oh, I don't have a tab, so that's fine. So I'm going to right-click and select Remove All Curves, and that'll just clear out that workspace there. So the first thing we're going to do is that we have this first particle emitter. We're going to call it smoke. And then we go to the required panel, and under the details, we want to make our material that smoke that we were looking at earlier. Now, if things don't always appear correctly, you can always restart your simulation, or you can restart level, and those will apply equally both ways. Now, sometimes there are some little difficulties here, so let me see what we're looking at. Looks like it's having some trouble displaying. Okay, and one thing that we can do to start helping us troubleshoot some of these things is we can drag the particle system out into our scene, and we can get a better idea of what it's doing there. So right now, you'll notice that it's actually emitting these kind of smoke particles, which is actually working. It's just not looking terribly great. And you'll see here, like, if I look at it in the viewport here, it really looks pretty dumb. So we definitely don't want it to look like that. But there's a lot of things that we can do to improve the quality. So I'm going to go kind of through line by line, and then we'll look at additional pieces that we can add. So for now, I think this is decently good, and I'm just going to move into viewing it in the actual Cascade editor. So now in Cascade, the display of your particle system has the same controls as it does in the main gameplay window. So, and then you can also change things like under the view, you can turn on and off the grid. You can toggle post processes. You can toggle motion. And motion is just a way of getting your particle system to actually move around, and it gives you a good idea of what happens if the particle system were rotating or moving in the environment. But we don't really need that right now. And you can also turn on orbit mode, which just changes how the camera operates. We don't really need that though. So, okay, so I just want to maintain my focus on my particle system here, and we want to do a few different things. So, first of all, let's make sure in our required space, our emitter duration seems like it's doing okay. We don't need to worry too much about delays. So all of that stuff seems fine. Under rendering, there's a max draw count, which is useful. We're not going to need to edit this too much right now, but if you find that your particles are just displaying too many, you can use this as kind of a performance limiter, so reducing the number of particles that are displaying. But okay, so I'm going to click in the spawn category, and there's a bunch of different properties. And usually, what I like to do is I like to type in values for them, and then you can graph them to get more specific results. So rate at this point is a constant 20. So if I were to up that to 40, then you'd see it'd be producing twice as many. And then we have our rate scale, so we can actually change what the scale of that rate is. Now, for right now, let me see. I think I'm going to do a constant 40 for distribution, and I'm going to do, let's see. I'm probably going to do 2 of the rate scale for right now, and so that we have a few more things actually coming out of the particle system. Now, one thing that's worth noting, spawn is a continuous rate, and burst is like an exact push of so many particles at a given moment. So like, for example, if you were making a blood spurt, it's very likely that what you would do would create a burst, which is like instant, and then you would actually say how many you wanted to burst and at what time you wanted them to burst. So for example, if you wanted to do like 3 different blood spurts or something, you could say, oh, I want it to do 10 different blood particles, and I'm going to have one happen at 0, which is right at the beginning, one at 0.2, which is right after a certain amount of time has passed, like 0.2 seconds, and then one at like 0.5, and then it would be kind of like a kind of thing where it would all burst out. And we don't need to worry about that for this, because this is a continuous effect. But excuse me. But what we do want to do is just make sure that we've got a decent rate here. And so lifetime, let's see, I think right now the lifetime is decent. We don't really have enough of an effect to see what's going on. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that we've got the initial size that we want. And for initial size, it's really just like how big it is in the environment. So I'm going to take a look at my effects in the actual Unreal window. And so under initial size, we have this distribution, and we can control the size differently in different axes. And one thing that's cool about initial size is because you have a maximum and a minimum, you actually make it vary based on which ones you're using. So for example, I can change the maximum to 100, and then I can make the minimum like maybe 50. And so that means that the size of the particle will be anywhere from 50 and 100 when it spawns. Now, because we just made these bigger, what we're probably noticing is that these particles aren't living very long and they're not going very far. So in the initial velocity, what we want to do is we want to adjust our start velocity. And we have 2 values. We have start velocity and start velocity radial. Now, right now, this is going -10 in x, -10 in y to +10 in x and +10 in y. And it has a 50 to 100 in Z. And so Z in Unreal or in 3ds Max is up, whereas Z in Maya or Unity is actually depth, and Y is up. So just be mindful of that. So I'm going to try seeing what happens if I make these go from 100 to 250. Okay, so that's okay, I guess. But maybe that's a little bit too much. So I'm going to go down to 175 and 75. So it'll go between 75 and 175. Now, because I want this to show up a little bit longer, like the smoke is going up higher, I'm going to want to make the lifetime longer. So right now the lifetime is a min, max, and 1. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the min of 2 and the max of 4. And I'm going to see what happens there. Okay, so we've got the smoke kind of billowing there. Now, that's not looking too terrible, but there's definitely some things that we're going to have some trouble with. One of them is just that, like, as they start to get further away, they start to just look a lot worse. And then also you notice, because everything is coming in at the same angle, it's kind of running into some problems. So remember we had that initial velocity. One thing that we can do is it defaults to not having an initial rotation velocity, but I think what we're going to try to do is, let's see if we can do like -10 to positive 20. Let's see. So let me see if that's doing any rotation now. Actually, let me see, make this a little more extreme. Okay, so that's not really doing quite what I was hoping it would do. But there's a few other ways that we can handle that, because I think that that's not probably the best thing to do in this section. But we might actually have to have another property there, so I'm just gonna zero that out for now. But there's a few things that we can do for this. So one thing, and this is to give you an idea of what's happening with this color over life. One thing that I don't really like about the color is that, first of all, it looks like it's coming straight out of the ground, and there's a few ways that you can adjust that. One of them is by using a material effect to make things look like they're fading when they're getting closer. But to be honest, even if we had a fire here right now, we wouldn't want it to look like it was coming right out of the ground. So what I want to do is, in color over life, I'm going to go to alpha over life. And right now it has 2 elements. So it's 0.1 and 0.0. So this is, if we graph this, let's say if we, yeah, okay. So if you click the graph next to color over life, you'll notice it goes from 1 being fully visible to 0 being faded out. And so that doesn't look terrible, but what we're going to notice is it'll look way better if we actually started it out at a value where it is not, it's not actually on, and then rapidly move it on, and then turn it off again. So let's see here. Okay, so in my new value 2, I changed that value to 1, and so you have an in value and an out value here. So like the out value is the actual result, and then if you want to adjust these values in the editor, in the curve editor, you can hold down the control key, and then you can make adjustments. Or actually, you don't even have to hold the control key, so you can make it like it's going from here to there. And actually, I'm going to turn off the graph for color so that I only have the graph for alpha. And let me see. And I'm going to fit it horizontal and vertical so that I can see it better. Actually, that made it not very terribly easy to see, so let's see. What did we do wrong here? So, oh no, okay. So Nick, let me go ahead and show you. If you add a new value for a distribution curve, so for points, you just hit plus, and it adds an element. So let me actually, because I got a little bit away from myself. Let me undo a few times. And so we graph that in. So right now, I have two values. So there's 0 and 1. So if I were to grab the graph point right here and start moving it around, you can get an idea of like what the values are equivalent to because you get to see where they show up. So for example, in value is essentially where in time that shows up. And in the case of color over life, it's basically from the very start, which is 0, to the very end of the value's life. So, and then if you notice, like as I move it down, you get the out value, which is essentially like what the value is at a given point. So, if I wanted to do this manually by typing in numbers, I'd just hit a plus sign here, and I would set my in value to 1. Then on my my 1 value, I'd set it to 0.5, and then I'd have the my 0 value set to 0. So, and then on the out value, I'd type 0, 1, and then 0. So, and what would happen with that is that we notice that it starts coming in black, and so it fades from nothing, then it fades out again. And in some cases, that's not going to look right if it just goes in and out. So what I actually want to do is I want to change the tangents for each of these curves so that they're a little bit smoother. So the default here is linear, but you can change it to auto or auto clamped. And auto clamped is usually what I use. So I'm changing each of these to auto clamped. And so then that'll just create a more natural value. And then what you'll notice is that you get a slightly better result for your transition effect. But then the other thing is that if you want it to look like it's staying visible for longer, you can also add in more points. So like I could add in another point here by hitting the plus and say, so I try to keep them in order, but so this one's at 0.5. So if I made this one at 0.25, then I made the next one at 0.75. That's at the value of 1. And then I made my third point show up at 1 and be 0. Then you'd notice that it comes on quicker and stays on longer. And you can also set the interp mode in the actual values here. So there's a lot of different ways you can handle this stuff, and I just want to basically give you an idea of how that works. But now I think that we're at a little bit close to the limit of what we can do without adding in any new elements. So let's go ahead and do that. So when you right-click in the empty space of a particle system, what you get access to is a bunch of new properties. So you can set up acceleration, you can set up collisions, you can add, like the color over life, for example, is actually a value that's just here. You can set up a kill box, you can set things to be producing their own light, you can change location, rotation, all kinds of stuff. So one of the things that I really want to do, because this is definitely not looking the way I want it to, is I want to right-click, select rotation, and I want to do initial rotation. And what initial rotation gives me as an option is I can do a start rotation, and it's a minimum and maximum of 1. Actually, that's interesting. That might help us solve our problem for the velocity thing. Let me take a look at that and see if maximum 1, if that will work. No, it won't, so I'm not going to worry about that for right now. Okay, so in your initial rotation, basically what it's telling us is that it will be anywhere between 0 and 1, which is the full range of rotations. So that allows our smoke to come in at different rotation values. But we also want it to, like, smoke doesn't usually look very realistic coming from a small point and just staying the same size. So what we want to do is we want to add a new value for size called size by life. And if you look at size by life, we can create a curve for it, or we can look at these values and tweak them. So I'm actually going to remove all curves from the graph. I'm going to graph size by life. And right now what you'll notice it's doing is, because it doesn't actually change at all, it just goes from 1 to 1. And so first thing I can do is I can change the point at 0 to be a value of 0. And so that'll make it look like it's getting a little bit thinner at the start. But then I want it to actually start getting a little bit bigger than this as it goes on. So I'm going to change the value for the second one to 2. Now, this isn't quite creating the effect that I want, because I want this to be kind of a slow, gradual increase. And because there's two things that are worth noting. One of them is that these values are basically multipliers. So a value of 1 is the full size that it would be, and a value of 0 is just completely non-existent. So a value of 2 means that at its maximum, it's twice as big as its default. And so the default is that initial size value. So over life, it ends up being twice the size of that initial size value. But now that we're getting things to look a little bit more realistic, what we want to do is we want to start making it look like it's being a little bit less aggressive. So I'm going to adjust the initial velocity and also the lifetime. So I think one thing that happened when we were editing last time is I actually modified the lifetime a little bit too much. So okay. So it's starting to create that kind of plumage. But I want to also increase or reduce the speed, actually. So I'm going to change that velocity. I'm going to make it 125 and 50. I think will start to look pretty decent. Okay, so now there's still more things that I want to control here. So I'm actually going to add in another effect, which is rotation over life. Let's see. And so actually, I think maybe what would be better than a rotation over life would be a rotation rate over life. So let's take a look at that. I think there's a few ways we could do this. Let me take a look at the rotation really quick. Do a rotation over life. And then I'm going to add in two elements. So one, the in value is 0. The other, the in value is 1. I'm going to remove that the previous curve. And then I'm going to graph this new curve. And I'm going to take a look at what happens when I just start adjusting this value. Okay, so yeah, that's it's going to be interesting because okay, yeah, so it might actually be better to use a So what might be helpful to do here is we're going to have to set a very, very subtle values to get this to make sense. And I want to make it so that it okay, so I'm going to make this a very, very, very slight effect. So it's going to do a little bit of rotation. And just making modifications to the curves until I get a result that I feel comfortable with. Now, I'm really not getting a result that I like with that, so I think I'm going to take a look at rotation rate over life and see if we get a better effect that way. Let's see. Hitting undo here a few times. Okay, so that's not necessarily doing exactly what I'd like it to do. I think that actually, so rotation over life is probably going to get the best results here. but we just want to be careful with it to make sure that it's not doing anything too nuts. So I'm going to make sure that I've got two elements. One is a 0, one is a 0.1. I'm going to graph it. And then we'll just drag these points and get kind of a result that we feel comfortable with. I'm going to fit these. Let's see. So if yeah, that's looking a little wild. I'm going to undo. Okay, so I want to get a little bit of a rotation at the beginning. This is tricky, so I don't want to give you guys the wrong advice here. So I think we're probably not going to see too much. I'll come back to that because actually I think that rotation is something that's really nice to get so that you get kind of a swirling effect, but I haven't really gotten that to work out that way. So don't worry too much about rotation for right now. I think that'll be okay. So I'm going to take a look at this particle effect, and we're going to see how it's looking. So it's actually not too bad, but for now, I want to move on to another effect. So, like, first of all, if you want to take a look at what's happening with this, you can move it around, and you can actually see what it does is it's kind of bursting smoke around. I'm going to put it on the table here. So we're going to do one more particle, and what we're basically going to do is we're going to be working our way up to building like an all-encompassing kind of like fire particle effect. So this should be okay for our initial start on this smoke thing, and then we'll add in a few different elements. So okay, so I'm actually going to save this particle effect, this fire particle effect. I'm going to close it out, and I'm going to make a new material, and I'm going to call this M particle sparks. Now, particle sparks work pretty much the same way in a lot of the basic properties as the smoke did. So instead of opaque, we're going to make it translucent. For the shading, we're going to do unlit. And then we're going to use our particle features to add in emissive color and opacity. So I'm going to search for a particle color. Drag out a particle color here. And then, now there's a few different ways that we can do this, but I want to show you kind of like a little bit of a hack or a shortcut, if you will, for getting a radial effect without having to do a whole lot of extra work. So there's this thing called radial gradient exponential. And you can drag this out. And what a radial gradient will do is basically like what we did with that texture, but it does it mathematically. So you can grab and create a radial gradient really easily. And that'll make it look like it's just creating a color effect there. So I'm going to add in, so I've got that radial gradient, but I don't want to do just the radial gradient because I want the opacity to be controlled by the particle color as well. So I'm going to make a multiply by holding down M and clicking. I'm going to make that exponential gradient. I'm going to drag in the alpha, and then I'm going to drag the result of that multiply into the opacity. And The last thing I want to do is I want to set up a particle color. But I think that in this case, I'm just going to add a very simple setup. So I'm going to make it constant 3, which is just going to be a color. And in this case, I'm going to just set it to be a value of 1. So I double-clicked it, just turned all the value up to white. And then I have my particle color here. And this is a good idea of like this is one of the things that's worth noting about like having this radial gradient thing. We can do this to actually get effects without having to make textures for it. So I'm making a different example in this case. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. And should be good. So now I'm going to create a new particle system. So I'm going to right-click, select particle system. I'm going to call this PS_sparks. I'm going to drag it out into the scene. And this one, I don't have to put it exactly where the smoke is, but we can get that to work along with that soon. So now that I've got that particle system, I'm going to double-click it to open it. And what we're going to do, I'm going to go through this one a little bit quicker because I know I'm running out of time. But I'm going to go ahead and set my emitter under the required to use that M particle sparks. Then I'm going to save it. Restart the sim, restart level. Now let's see. Okay, it looks like the material might not have applied correctly, so I'm going to grab that particle sparks effect. Okay, there we go. No, actually, so I just opened it up again, and it looks like it's actually displaying correctly. Now, because this effect is going to need to look a little bit more intense, because we're trying to make it look like it's bright, we want the color values to actually be a lot more extreme. So I'm going to right-click, I'm going to select color, and I'm going to make an initial color. Now, it's good to keep these things organized. You don't have to, but I can actually drag this and move it into a different location. So this initial color, I can go to Start Color and Start Alpha. But for right now, all I want to worry about is the actual color. And I'm actually going to make this, because we're making sparks, I'm going to make it kind of a red color. But we want to make it really intense. So let's see. Okay. That doesn't seem to be cooperating too much, so let me see. Interesting. Okay. Take a look at this real quick, because that should be doing more to get that color to work. So just give me 1 second, and I'll take a look at, because normally you should be able to set color more effectively than that. So maybe it's the color over life that's actually causing that problem. No. Let's see. Take a look at if this is actually, there's some other reason that this is not looking too bright. I'll adjust some light intensity here. Okay. So yeah, no, it's definitely not not intended behavior there. So give me 1 second. Just a second, apologies for the delay. Let me make sure I've got my effects set up correctly. Okay, I'm gonna simplify this a little bit, so I'm not multiplying it by this color. Instead, I'm going to use the radial gradient. I'm going to save that. Okay, so let me go through the process of getting this to look correct, and then we'll see what we can do about making this look like it has more of a correct brightness level. So hopefully we'll be able to get kind of a balance of both of those effects, and then I can quickly wrap this up. So, okay, the first thing we want to do is we want to set up this particle system so that it has a screen alignment for its PSA velocity, which basically means that it's going to orient itself to its velocity. And you'll actually notice that in the scene. If you look, it's actually the squares are actually aiming in the direction that they're going. And so for initial size, we want a 4. Maybe it's like 4 for max and 2 for min. Now, one thing, like because we're creating sparks, you'll notice that you can actually modify different aspects independently. So, if I were to take this. We could make it so that there's kind of a minimum and maximum range of different sizes so they don't all come in evenly. But there's actually a better way of doing that than making it non-uniform here, because we want to make sure that sparks look like they're stretching in the direction that they're actually headed. So I'm going to add in an initial location. And for initial location, we want to basically what you can do in that node, which I'm going to grab and place over here. Let me actually delete that initial color for right now. But so initial location allows us to pick a different position that's not just directly in the center. And we actually do that for the smoke as well. So basically you do something like maybe you do a max of 1 and then a min of -1 in all of these axes. And that just means that it'll have 1 kind of distance to travel between. But 1 is a really small value because it's in centimeters. So if we did something like 10, it would probably be a little bit more correct. Now, because we're doing sparks, we probably want to make them look like there's more of them showing up. So under spawn, we could change this to like a huge amount. We could also use multiply the rate so that we get, so it looks like there's quite a few coming out. Then what we want to do is we want to set up a constant acceleration to make it look like they're falling in gravity. So I'm going to take that initial velocity. I'm actually going to adjust this a bit because I'm going to make it look like it's like sparks are coming out in all directions. So right now our initial velocity has a negative 10 to positive 10 in the x and y and 150 in the up axis. So I'm going to increase this range so it's like from 30 to negative 30 in both of these, and that means it'll go out in a lot of different directions. And then what we're going to do, actually I think I'm fine with it going up like that for a moment, because what we want to do is we're going to add in a new module, which is acceleration, constant acceleration. And then under constant acceleration, what we want to do is we want to make it negative 980 to make it look like it's basically falling down. And 980 is actually directly coinciding with what things will do to simulate gravity. So that's definitely pretty useful. So if you see here, it looks like things are sort of falling. Now, because we added in that realistic approach to gravity, it actually is now looking a little bit more like confined. So what we would probably want to do is actually increase the velocity a bit to make it look like things are flying out and falling a little bit more. So if I change these numbers to 60, between 60 and negative 60, and between 100 and 200 in the positive, then we get something that looks more like it's shooting out sparks in a bunch of different directions. And the reason I'm doing it this way is because eventually you will end up making these look like they're actually coming out of a burning ember or a fire. So I'm going to show you really quick what it would look like if I were to say make it only come out one axis, but make it like really, really extreme. Essentially, it would look like it was coming out and shooting out in that direction. And if you rotated it, they would look like they're shooting out straight out. And that's something like if you had sparks coming out of something like, say, a wall panel or something, you could do sparks like that. But I think that for now, we just want to do something that looks like it's kind of sparking up and out. And I'm just hitting undo, Control Z a few times to make the adjustment to move back. Okay, and so let's see here. All right, so now that we've got that kind of sorted out, we've got all these sparks falling. Let me take a look at the color over life thing, because I think that there's some stuff that we need to do to see about getting this to look a little bit brighter. Let's see, I'm gonna, so if you click on color over life and you go to click the graph, you'll see color over life and alpha. We don't necessarily need to worry about alpha, but we do want to take a look at the color over life part. So I'm going to collapse the alpha over life. I'm going to go to the distribution. We're going to look at these two different elements. We're going to have those for 0 and 1. And you can fit them vertically and horizontally on the graph. And let me see what I do here. So for out value, all right, let's see. Okay, there we go. now we got this taken care of. So, okay, so basically what you want to do in your out value here is you want to start increasing the brightness of this, this effect so that it looks more extreme. So you can adjust the value, but then you can also go and you can make it look like more red, or you can make it look more green, orange, or whatever. So I'm going to make it look kind of like it's kind of a yellowy effect. And then what I'm going to do is that in the next value, I'm going to go to the out. I'm going to change that value to 40 as well, but I'm going to move it really far in the red direction. So you'll notice it looks like it's kind of going from yellow to a bright red. And that'll just give you like a different effect. And then the brighter you make it here. So we were having a little bit of a problem before, and I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to edit it out of the video or not. But you might have noticed that the color wasn't changing. So the reason that the color wasn't changing is that actually this color over life was overriding the color that I was setting for the initial color. So if you try to set an initial color and it doesn't work, it's probably because you have a color over life property that's conflicting with it. So there's a couple of things that we want to do. So one of them is that we want to make a size by speed. So I'm going to go to size by speed. And it's not going to look like it's doing anything too extreme. But if I change this value, the speed scale to 4, and then I change the max scale to 4, let's see. So that looks a little funky, actually. Let's see. Okay, so in my case, there's a few different things I can do. Let me make sure that my initial size is not off here. So let me actually see if that works. Okay, so actually, I'm kind of okay with them not looking like they're streaking too much. But I don't quite like the way that that's looking. So, so basically, what you want to do is if you create a disparity between your x and y values, you'll get more extreme, like streaky looking effects. So because this is size by speed, it's in x and y, and you've got to kind of think of your effect as having an x and y value. So if you look at it in the actual scene, you'll see this is getting really, really extreme, and that's probably a little more extreme than we actually want it to be. So right now 1 to 8 is probably a little much. So make sure you have the speed scale and the max scale is something that you can control separately. So in this case, I have a 1 to 4, so it's 1 in x and 4 in y, and y is kind of the up and down axis of a spark. So like, I think that when you start getting them to be too extreme, they start looking weird when they change direction. But yeah, so actually, I might even want to up the number of particles. So now that we're getting a better effect here, you could change the required settings. Or I'm sorry, the spawn settings. We could do something like 160 or something, and do like a decent amount of particles. And you'll notice right now that they're like just clipping through the floor, which is probably not what we want. So what we're going to add to this to kind of wrap up this particle system here, and then I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up for the evening. But what you'd want to do is you want to set up a collision. And so the default is that a collision will cause it to die. But there are additional properties that you can control in the details panel for your collision, which is the damping factor. And so basically, you can control a few things. One of them is the damping factor, and then one is how many bounces that you can have. So let me see. So under max collisions, we're going to go to the distribution there. So right now it only has one collision. So I'm going to change the min to 3 and the max to 5. And under the damping, basically 0 means that it will completely damp everything. And if we do like a 0.5, 0.5, 0.5. So if I change everything to 0.5, that means that these will all start kind of bouncing off of the surface. And 0.5 just means that they'll lose half of their speed when they bounce. But if you set them all to 1, they don't lose any speed at all. And they essentially go in as strong as they went out. So if you want to get a good result, what you're probably going to look at is you want to do something like 0.75 to maybe 0.25 or something like that. And that'll get you a little bit more more natural result. And actually, now that I can see it in the scene, I actually kind of want to make the size by speed a little bit more extreme, so that they look thinner in one direction. So okay, so now then there's a pretty cool feature to add here, which is light. We can actually add light to these particles, and so if you right-click, select light, you can just go and add in a light effect. Now this looks pretty intense, right? And in this case, it's particularly because of how many particles we have. That's a lot of light to see out of something like this. But what's good is that there's a bunch of things that we can control about that light. So spawn fraction, first of all, that tells you what percentage of these actually create lights. And that's good for performance reasons. You don't want to have too many of these actually creating a light. But then you can also do brightness over life, and you can, right now there's a distribution float constant, which makes it 32 brightness. And if you change it somewhat, like, you can actually get something that looks a little bit more natural of what you're seeing in the environment. So like, for example, I set this constant to 2, but I could also set it to 4 maybe. And the main thing is that you just want it to look like it makes sense. And then you can also adjust the radius scale of, like, so if I were to double the radius, you'd notice that they just start looking a lot bigger. If I reduce the radius, then it looks like they're just like creating smaller effects. And that's useful. Like, now, one thing that you got to keep in mind with things like light is that light really quickly turns into something that will be super performance intensive. So you want to be careful about how you handle that. But it does give you the ability to create some pretty crazy cool looking effects. So like, I've got these sparks flying, and you really see that bouncing off. So okay, I think that's probably good as an initial introduction. And what I wanted to do is I'm going to break this up into 2 sections. So in the second lecture, what I want to do is we're going to create another fire effect. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take the smoke, the fire, and the sparks, and we'll combine them together into a single effect. And I think that'll be pretty interesting. But then I also probably wanted to go over a few other different things, like an explosion and some water dripping particles. So I think some of that I might actually change so that it's not as part of a lecture, but it's actually part of a tutorial. So we'll see where we get in the lecture, and then I'll go from there into more details. So anyway, that's it for my discussion tonight. Okay, I just saw Nick, you had a question. You had a question regarding Project 2? Go ahead and ask your question. If you're still here. I just looked over there and I wasn't sure how long ago that actually came up. Oh yeah, sorry, Nick. Yeah, so like actually, what happened there was I ran into that little trouble where the Sparks color wasn't working quite right, and so I stopped actually viewing the chat, and I didn't realize I think I missed you. Okay, so yeah, you had a trigger setup. Okay. So your concern mainly is that when you fell off of the platform, you were getting into a situation where like you couldn't really reset the gameplay on it because the platform was actually just like now animating without you, right? So that's something that is sort of like a safety catch. I'll take a look at that right now. Actually, I think I could probably do that. So let me see. I'm going to save the current level here. So that's something that's like fairly complicated. So first of all, I'm sorry, did you have any questions about the particle stuff while you're here? Because like I made the mistake of just kind of not paying attention when you were asking some questions. So like it looked like what you were saying was like the initial color for you created a much more violent stream. And there were a lot more particles coming out faster. So just to quickly answer some of that stuff, so like for these particle sparks, like yes, basically under the spawn category, you want to look at how many are coming out, like the constant value, and then you can adjust the rate scale. So like generally when you adjust the rate scale, like you double it or something like that, it'll just increase how many particles you're generating. And then like, so honestly, constant and rate scale are pretty similar. But constant gives you more specific information of exactly how many are showing. So if yours didn't have the stretch, let me just address that really quick, because the stretch is the size by speed. And so like when something is moving in a direction, it has its X and its Y values. And the Y is kind of like the up and down, and the X is the left and right, because these are sprite emitters. So they're emitting something that is basically like a square. So if you have your size by speed set to 4 and 4, you'll notice that they all kind of look like they're spherical. And now if they were set to 4 in X and 1 in Y, essentially it looks like they're flattening out kind of like a pancake. Whereas if you want them to be, so essentially X is the distance along the axis that is not moving forward or backward. So like, think of it as something that is aiming down or falling down. Y is the direction that it's falling, and then X is the direction to the sides of it. So if you want it to look like it's streaking, you basically, I just did like 4, and then you have 1 in speed scale and max scale, or you can set 0.5 in speed scale and max scale. So one thing that you want to keep an eye on, and just so if you're doing exactly what I was doing and you're not having that result, there's a few things you could check for. First of all, you want to make sure that the initial size is all even, right? So like if right now my initial size, I just have 4, 4, 4, 4, 4, and 4. And the reason for that is that I only want the size to be controlled by this size by speed property. Then the other thing is if you haven't saved it, you might want to try hitting restart sim or restart level. And so like, hopefully you'll be able to see an example of it. So I apologize if you're having issues there. But that should be a good idea of how that works. And if you have more issues, you can feel free to message me. But let me talk about your platform problem real quick, because there's a few ways you can handle that. Not all of them are perfect, but let me see here. So does that answer your question then enough that that you could be able to solve it, hopefully? Oh, it looked like that got really terrible. That's just me needing to make sure everything is saved properly. Okay. So I'm going to have to open my other project for my moving platform. One thing I do like less about Unreal than I do Unity is that it's a lot easier to get results that don't look correct because you haven't saved or compiled things. So let me open up that moving platform project. And yes, I'll save all. Now hopefully I have the project on enough. So I think I'll leave this part of the lecture in the video because it might be helpful to somebody. So have you guys been doing okay with having the lectures on YouTube and just being able to watch them kind of at your leisure? Does that work out fine? Let's see. I'm going to be really upset if I didn't save my project. I think that's dumb. Okay. So I don't think I saved my project. But let me go ahead and go through the process of making an elevator animation. So actually, you know what I'll do? Let me actually stop this broadcast for like a split second, and then I'll start up a new broadcast just so that I can kind of like mark it off. And I'll just mark this as a separate thing, which is like kind of a side tutorial, I guess, because that'll be a little bit easier. So I'll stop streaming for a second, and then I'll be right back.